The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. We're ready to get started. First off, I want to thank all of you for registering for this Ontario Systems webinar produced by insideARM.com for Pathways to Improved Patient Satisfaction. Ontario Systems is joined today by Experian Health, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to today's presenters. Steve Scibetta is Senior Director of Channel Sales at Ontario Systems. His 20-year career path has included stints as a Senior Programmer Analyst, Product Manager, Implementation Services Director, and Application Support Director. In that time, he's helped dozens of clients solve problems and enhance the bottom line with the goal of fueling community missions through his connections to some of the most prominent data service providers in IT. Sean Yates is a Vice President of Sales Support and Consulting at Experian Healthcare and is responsible for working with healthcare systems, hospitals, and medical groups nationwide to develop enhanced revenue cycle processes and manages pre-sales, sales support, and strategy consulting activities. Yates joined Experian Healthcare in 2010 and has more than 16 years of provider revenue cycle management and healthcare collections experience. And finally, hi. I'm Mike Bevel, an editor here at insideARM.com. I've got a few pieces of housekeeping I'm going to get us through really quickly. Please note the questions box available to you, or it might be the chat box. All of your mics have been muted. However, you can send your questions via the chat box at any time during the presentation. Some we'll answer during the presentation. Some we'll save for the Q&A at the end. Some we just won't be able to get to at all, but we will do our best. This question comes up a lot. You will receive follow-up materials like, for instance, this PowerPoint presentation from Ontario Systems within a week or so of this webinar. But I'm sure several of you will ask, and that's fantastic. Please make sure you take a few minutes to complete the survey after this webinar ends. The information is incredibly valuable to us as webinar producers, and we value your thoughts and opinions very much. Also, in this survey, there'll be space for you to ask any additional questions that we did not cover in the webinar or get to in the Q&A. Ask it there, and someone will get back to you. The final bit of housekeeping I've got to read is some legalese, so it goes on the record. Please bear with me. This information shared in this webinar is not intended to be legal advice, but simply informed opinion from a panel and may not be used as legal advice. Legal advice must be tied to the specific circumstances of each case. Every effort has been made to ensure this information is up to date. It is not intended to be a full and exact representation of the law in any area, nor should it be used to replace advice of your own legal counsel. And that will totally stand up in any court like Matlock. And with all that out of the way, I will turn this over to Steve Scibetta from Ontario Systems. Steve?
Hey, folks. Thanks for spending time with us this afternoon. And hopefully I don't get in the habit of speaking as fast as Mike just did as we go through this. Like if you want to flip the slides, or maybe you have. I'm just not seeing it updated on my screen. I'm on the problem statement slide.
Yep, we should be there.
Okay. I'll just keep moving. Consumers continue to enroll in HCHPs. Healthcare reform continues to march forward unabated, and your start of your deductible refreshes continue to catch patients off guard. These three factors, probably more than any other, have hospitals, your business offices, and in general the communities on edge, and rightly so. Many of the elderly injured or ill are unprepared to pay for the cost of their care, while providers have found reimbursements dwindling and new rules and regulations confusing. What's the best way for healthcare finance leaders to approach this new business climate? That's what we hope to help you to think about a bit today. Under ACA, we all know that your Medicare reimbursement is tied directly to the quality of care and to just generally patient satisfaction. So the new law has made it clear that this must be a goal or the crux of every successful healthcare episode. But what Sean and I want to think a little bit about today is, what does satisfaction really mean? We feel it has to do with the entire experience of receiving care, from intake to treatment, follow-up, and payment. We feel it because a quick recovery means little when a patient feels that they've been treated unfairly on their way out the door. So new strategies, tactics, and technology can help ensure that that doesn't happen. Hospitals and health systems with the best patient sat track records and failing to make 4 business practices central to their operations because they enhance patient sat and thus reimbursement under the new healthcare law. So the facts are in. I'm on the consumer pain point slide, Mike. The facts are in. Patients are having problems paying their medical bills, are being placed with collection agencies, are changing their way of life, and are entering into long-term payment arrangements to gain some relief. So how do we as healthcare finance leaders find a means to manage the self-pay portfolio while keeping the patient's needs at the center of our thinking? Next slide. So in this webinar, Sean and I will present a step-by-step approach to improve your patient satisfaction that directly results in increased revenue from self-pay liabilities, helps patients cope with HDHP plans, and increases patient accounts receivable collections. We hope that your investment in this session today will help you to see the benefit of these 4 pathways. Patient analytics or segmentation. We see your physicians examine patients before making a diagnosis and prescribing therapies. Is there any reason that we in the business office shouldn't do the same? So in our time together, we plan to clarify the business benefit and maybe some of the technology tools available to diagnose a patient's ability or propensity to pay. Another topic would be patient connections. The more ways you have to communicate with the patient, and more importantly, have them communicate with you, the better. Let's consider how to expand and improve your communication infrastructure in ways that will not only heighten patient satisfaction, but create more opportunities for you to collect patient liabilities. And as you see here on the slide, all of this centers around the patient at the heart of your strategy. The third pathway will be patient convenience. We see that best practice organizations have learned how to extend their business office into a 24/7 service center that presents financial information and payment options to their patients when and how they seek it. Let's consider what this might look like in your organization. And then lastly, patient empathy. Understanding your patient's financial challenges puts you in a better position to convey their financial responsibilities while also enabling them to meet their obligations and uncover any assistance available to them. In essence, it's a bit of walking in their shoes as you consider your strategies and tactics. Next slide, please, Mike.
Hey, Steve, you are coming in a little bit choppy with your microphone. No, you had no way of knowing until I just told you. And I'm going to ask the audience if they wouldn't mind, if you are also having audio issues, if we're coming through choppily, use your chat box to let me know, and if it's okay. Some of you are, some of you aren't.
Yes, thank you. Please do let us know. I'm actually on my mobile, but with pretty good coverage right now, so I'm not sure that it's on my end alone. So, and I am speaking directly into my mic. So
okay, I am seeing several people saying that yes, the audio. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Everyone is choppy, I'm told. Huh.
Because I actually was hearing some of the same when you were speaking earlier, Mike. It wasn't only maybe when I was speaking.
Okay.
Shall I press on?
You know what? So here's what I'm going to try. Folks, this is live television. Remember Gracie Allen and all that, and ask your parents. The point is, I'm going to keep the webinar going, but I'm going to hang up and dial in again and see if that fixes mine. Do you mind doing that as well, Steve? And maybe the two of us will sound better when we call back in, and we'll do it quickly. And we apologize for this possible waste of time.
Well, Mike, why don't you allow me to try that first, because it might simply be my end, especially since I'll be doing a lot of the speaking. Why don't I do that first? All right. Thanks, folks.
All right. Someone wrote in that Mike sounds clear, Steve sounds muffled. I'm going to get that on a T-shirt because that's the nicest thing anyone has said about me today.
Hi, this is Stephen Reconnected. Does this sound any better?
So far to me it sounds better. Whoa, much better, said that person who is now my new best friend from before. So why don't you keep going, and we'll pretend like nothing ever happened.
Oh, very good. So I'm on the HTHP slide. Thanks again, folks. So my thoughts here are that risk continues to shift to consumers as HTHPs are here to stay. And I guess it's fair to say that their risk has really become our risk. The use of HTHPs by employers to provide insurance coverage is up 46% since simply 2010, and now represents nearly 20% of overall commercial insurance enrollment. Many patients are unprepared to pay the cost of their care. For the business office, this delivers increasing risk and volume to your patient liability portfolio at a time when margins continue to tighten. Revenue cycle leaders need to adopt a perspective that views this patient liability volume as more of a financial portfolio, I would say, and as such requires a strategic response. I've been around a while in this field and with these different technologies and, frankly, this business climate. And so I would say that gone are the days of simply sending statements and maybe making a phone call now and again. I think that with some of the technologies that Sean will share here shortly and some of the supporting approaches that we see in the market, we'll see that this can become more strategic for you. So when you're addressing this risky portfolio, the business office needs strategies that will allow them to work smarter, not harder. And we've seen impressive gains in different technologies, like those that Sean will discuss, analytics, scoring, segmentation. What we see is very contemporary contact management solutions. We're seeing more and more technology pointed to the consumer, allowing 24/7 access. And automation, I think, is another key, whether it's your discount programs, your charitable programs, your FAP programs, but automation of those to ensure that they're being consistently applied is another important step. So all these tools really can become part of your strategic response. I'd say another business driver to consider is that Medicare rolls are on the increase. According to AARP, 8,000 people are aging into Medicare daily. AARP has shared in some of their results that of the 65 and older population, 22% of boomers aging into Medicare have no retirement savings, and 14% have no personal savings whatsoever. Of those coming behind them, at 46 to 64-ish range, 26% have no personal savings. Data tells us that the average retiree spends $4,600 a year on premiums, copays, deductibles, and different services, with an estimate that they will need hundreds of thousands of dollars to cover medical expenses through their retirement lifetime. So this kind of makes it really quickly apparent that these new Medicare beneficiaries are not likely to behave or display the same repayment behavior as today's Medicare retirees. So again, your patient's risk has become your risk very quickly. So let's take some time and hear from Sean next. Sean's going to discuss how different analytic models and scoring and segmentation can dramatically impact how we address these important patient needs. Sean?
Great, thanks, Steve. I appreciate that intro, and if we'll go ahead and move to the next slide there, Mike. Data and analytics and how you segment your accounts is really important, and I think that's going to give you the ability to focus on the right accounts. And as you think about that, it's important to really consider what are the different types of models that exist out there today. And I wanted to give you a little background because I think it's important as you think about who your provider is of this data and how, what is that analytics really telling you. So the first type of model you'll probably see is as a credit data model, and this is where it's primarily focused on credit data. And this data typically, we're getting a little static there. So based upon the credit data model, you have some situations where the accounts will, you've got some thin files from people that, younger people who don't have credit files. You have people who've got really negative credit, so they might not necessarily get a hit there. And then you'll have behavioral models where you're looking at the last 6 to 12 months of data. What are the characteristics of those patients and how they perform? Very good models, but you tend to, if there's a change in your demographics, you have a high deductible healthcare plan that moves in with a major employer, or maybe an employer closes, and you want to be able to see right away that your demographics has changed. So that's some of the limitations there. And then from a demographics model standpoint, you're looking at where they live. Pretty popular 10 years ago, but there's some complexities, problems with that data today, just based upon the fact that a lot of people have moved due to the recession and the mortgage foreclosure crisis. And when we go through and you look at demographics data, you just have to be careful because a lot of those people have moved. So what you ideally want is really a model that kind of looks at all three. In Experian, we utilize data from the credit file as well as data from the behavioral model from previous history that we're able to obtain from the client. And then we do plug in some demographics data, but that's kind of limited. And we put all this together. When you do that, you kind of get a breakout. And Mike, if you'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So Mike, if you move to the next slide. And what you'll get is a breakout where you're able to really see this type of segmentation. And each of these entities or blocks acts as its own entity. And what we're really able to identify is really three basic types of patients and where they fall into. And it's important because you have your first patients are the ones these are the patients that's going to pay you. So these are patients you want to make sure you give time to make that first payment, to set up that payment plan. You don't want to call them too soon. You don't want to be too aggressive in that respect. The middle of the road patients, your segment 3 as an example, these are the patients that are struggling. These are the ones where you need to contact maybe a little earlier, have a different strategy, maybe give it to an early out agency if you want to at that point, for them to probably do some of that activity. And then the last group are the patients that are never going to pay you. And these are the ones that you want to limit your activity on, possibly look at some type of movement to bad debt early, or you could look at some type of presumptive charity model if you want to as well. We have clients that do these different aspects. So when you put all this together, it's much more than just buying a score or buying a behavioral score. It's putting all the data together to identify the 50% of your accounts that really resonate with about 90% of the patient cash that's going to be collected. And with this type of modeling and segmentation, you're really able to identify those patients and treat them in one of those three buckets like I talked about. So if we'll go to the next slide, Mike. So to kind of illustrate what we're talking about, I've provided some examples here of some client strategies. And this one here shows an example of a strategy where, you know, there's more than just the score and there's more than just the patient responsibility balance on the side that factors into the model. You know, we use financial class, patient type, previous payment history, several other variables that are factored in. And in that model, you can see different blocks of accounts and where they're going to fall. And again, you're trying to identify those patients that are going to pay you, that you have limited activity, and then you have the middle of the road patients where you need to call a little sooner. And then identifying those patients on the 4s and 5s that you really want to be able to make sure you treat and not spend too much cost on those patients as you try to collect those accounts. So we'll go to the next slide, Mike. So when you're able to build out your model or your strategy, what you're then able to see is where you can identify that group of accounts in your top tier segments. They're going to result in about 95% that they're going to collect in the first 12 months. And this is a real strategy. Data from a client that we have. We've been tweaking their model. It's a living model that we have based upon the data. And we're able to really tweak and fine-tune. And the different colors represent the write-off process. So the cream colored is more when they write off the bad debt, and then they do a pre-bad debt process when it writes off, and then they give it to their agency at the green part. So they're trying to identify when the account pays, what is the activity. And for these top segment accounts, they don't really do anything till day 75. And this is the scenario that they have to go in and take a look at. If you go to the next slide, Mike. And then at another...
I'm sorry, Sean.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean, this is Steve. I'm sorry. The slides were kind of trailing you pretty significantly there. I think the folks are now seeing, at least on my end, we're seeing slide 11.
What
yeah, that's so as you refer to those slides. Oh, here's 12. 12 just popped for me. So
okay.
Just as you refer to the content, I think they're going to be lagging you a bit. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So this last slide is an example of a client that utilized that strategy, and they outsourced all their accounts to an early out agency, and that agency was helping them collect those accounts. And what we did is we identified those segments like I showed you on the earlier charts, and what we're then able to do is we identified those patients that are going to pay. They then brought those accounts and just kept them in-house. They didn't add people. They didn't increase their call volumes. All they simply did was let statements continue to go out. And what they were able to do then is then give the middle-of-the-road accounts to the early out agency and let them focus their time and efforts on those. So they saved money from a contingency fee standpoint. They didn't have to pay the contingency fee on some of these accounts that they knew they were going to pay. And then on the middle-of-the-road accounts, they were able to do some of the lift some of the cash that they had, and it worked out to the tune of about $900,000 in contingency fee they saved. And then they saw about a $700,000 increase in just the first 6 months of the project. So just different looks at how you can take that data and what it can do to help you segment and drive your strategy that you're working for. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Steve. And you can go ahead and talk about how we can incorporate that strategy into their processes so they can move forward.
Excellent, thanks. Hopefully you guys are still hearing me well. Sorry for some of the technical snags. I understand that some of the GoToWebinar slides are updating almost immediately and others are lagging a bit. So we'll be cautious of that and mindful of that. So I'm on my first slide, returning the patient's demographic and age shifts slide, please. So as we consider maybe consider a strategy, keep using that word, that places the patient at the center of our thinking, it would be wise to understand how patient demographics and preferences are changing. So let's think a little bit about that. It's likely to come as no surprise that our population is becoming older, more diverse, and is growing slower than in previous generations. The population of those 65 plus years in age is projected to become larger than those that are less than 18 years of age, and that's supposed to happen by some trending in 2056, which to me says it's going to happen in my children's lifetimes, that shift or that tipping point. Next slide, Mike, please. And so while if we think about the household, while indebtedness in the U.S. household is declining, likely due to tighter lending practices and access to capital, many patients do not have either the resources or access to financing to help pay for an unexpected healthcare debt. When we consider the prevalence of HDHPs within our patient community, we can see that many patients are working without a safety net. And as this slide depicts, you get a little bit of a feel for what the 50-plus age group is, how they're managing their financial health, in essence. Next slide, Mike. So let's think about their kids, right? Term we see quite prevalently in various industries, and ours as well, is the term millennial. Millennial is an abbreviation for millennial generation, if you're not familiar. And it's a term used by demographers to describe a segment of the population born roughly between 1980 and they say about 2000, depends on who you talk to. These are sometimes referred to Generation Y in the media and are, in essence, the children of the post-World War II baby boomers. What's really interesting about that is that millennials as a group or as a demographic are increasingly diverse and are estimated to be 76 million in the U.S. The most concerning stat by one study, and actually by a number of studies, one of which is from the Center for American Progress, anticipates that these millennials will be the first American generation to do less well economically than their parents. That's worth noting. Less well economically than their parents. So let's also note how tech savvy these kids are, right? Many have grown up with access to the internet and can't even imagine or recall a life without it. So this will continues to be kind of reflected in their preferences for technology and payment solutions, et cetera. And I think you can't discuss that point without saying the word mobile, right? So there's clearly a shift to mobile, probably for all of us, but most particularly for that demographic. So our patients, in essence, are more connected to their mobile technology than ever before. I know very few of our patients likely recall old rotary dial phones and maybe even recall an era of where they didn't have call waiting, and much less would we all say that millennials likely don't even answer the phone anymore, right? So yeah, maybe I'm kind of showing my ears when I make those statements or observations, but the truth be told is we reach these folks differently than you might reach Steve or Sean. Next slide, Mike, please. So if we think about connectivity and how we reach these changing demographics, we should be mindful of the demographic changes and these preferences to maintain connectedness. And that should be top of mind for us as we consider differing strategies. Connecting involves not only knowing what type of contact your patients prefer, but having the infrastructure in place to respond to all of them in an appropriate manner. So when you call a patient, for example, an agent should be available to speak with them immediately without the delay or a pause that less favored technologies might offer. Your web portal should be available 24/7, and credit card transactions need to be PCI certified. Likewise, your IVR should be certified to take those transactions and deliver clear, consistent messages compliant with both your policy and governmental regulation. In essence, patients who become frustrated with our collection practices become less than satisfied consumers, which can result in a bit of a double whammy. So here's the double whammy. You end up not collecting on the payments you're owed, and that payment that you're owed becomes more risky and less collectible, and ultimately your patient satisfaction takes a hit. It's kind of this domino effect, right? This thought of connectedness should be really, really central to what we emphasize in our strategies today. So when it comes to contact management technology, we feel that convenience and performance are two factors that should draw your closest attention. Look for plug-and-play solutions that are quickly to scale, maybe adjust easily to the ebbs and flows of your business. These technologies should be hosted, or at least be offered as hosted, to offer you flexibility and also ultimately impact and reduce your TCO. So there's a lot of options out there, and there are options beyond those that Sean and I would be able to help you with. And so we ask that you just consider for your organization what the right fit is, what's best to breed in your mind. So Mike, on that next convenience slide, please. So, connectedness is important, but also convenience, we think, is another key word or pathway. So giving your patients options can be a real breakthrough as you promote a collection program that both improves recovery and impacts your patient satisfaction. In today's healthcare business environment, it's imperative to understand the many ways people want to make a payment. Like we were saying earlier about those millennials, et cetera, but it's really true of each demographic that walks through your doors. Do they prefer an IVR interaction, or do they want to talk to an account representative directly? Are they seeking a letter, a statement? Will that suffice, or do they want to log on to a web portal at 10 o'clock at night? Or is there a bit of a mix? None of these, some of these, all of these. As we've already discussed, do they have a different approach or mode of connecting to you based upon their own preferences, their own needs, and the timing of their business week? So we understand, that there are folks that are simply less likely to answer their phone today than they were before. So we have to consider solutions that reach them in a manner that is best to conveniently engage these patients. I'm on the next pathway, please, empathy. So reaching financial goals in a compassionate manner depends on a hospital's ability to maintain consistency across payment arrangement and discounting policies. And maintaining consistency implies a certain degree of automation. Are you offering the right discount to the right patients every time? Are you delivering the same compliant, compassionate message? Perhaps more importantly, are your policies compliant with new federal and state law? We feel a business office's ability to take a holistic view of receivables is a real key. When you communicate with the patient and finally connect, whether by phone or writing or whatever it may be, your solutions should give you visibility to that patient's entire relationship with your health system, with your hospital. Without that visibility, it's easy for those patient liabilities to fall through the cracks or sit in the books for several months or even years. So we think that being able to talk to a patient about all their bills at the same time, not just the most recent, is strategic. That's the difference between one phone call and three, one statement and three. We feel that, and we see that patients then walk away with a greater satisfaction when they have a perception and a belief that you're as focused on their financial well-being as you are or were on their clinical well-being. So focus first on establishing purposeful, clear plans based on your community's needs and goals. Then establish communication strategies to effectively communicate those options. So when you're ready to execute, technology helps ensure consistency and manage those increasing account volumes. Mike, I'm on the 4 pathway slide, please. So kind of as we kind of draw to a close and head towards some Q&A, it might seem like the deck's stacked against healthcare finance leaders these days. So that might be why you want a bit of an ace up your sleeve in a strategy that thinks about these things. The communities you serve define your success more than ever before. So keeping them happy and understanding what they want, when they want it, is central to your strategy. There's really no reason to wait until they tell you because it's likely you already know. And it's just a matter of asking the right questions and following up on the answers. We see that by keeping the patient at the center of your planning and strategy, you'll be positioned to meet the challenges of today's healthcare finance landscape. So, Mike, if we could consider the different questions that have come in, I'm going to roll through those and I can tee them up either to Sean or I. One that I see here real quickly, Sean, and it might just have been because of some of the lag in the different slides when you were sharing with us. Can you clarify for us the difference between a score and a segmentation?
Sure, that's a great question. So a score is basically something that's a part of one of those models. So you could have a behavioral score, a credit score. A segmentation code is something much more involved. So it involves previous payment history, balance size. You may look at patient type, financial class, multiple variables that are factored in along with a score. So segmentation coding is much more than just going out and purchasing a score, and that's why you get that breakout of 50% of the accounts that equal 90% of the dollars. So that's a good question.
Thanks, Mike. Or Sean, sorry about that. Thanks, Sean. There's one I think that I may have prompted in a comment I made earlier about connected technology and IVRs and things like that. And it's a really, really timely question. It is simply, have any of your clients used IVR technology to manage patient surveys? And it's a great question because, yes, we have. We have seen that investment get leveraged beyond just taking that inbound call and giving the calling party an option to make a payment or talk to a representative or attain an itemized bill. Those are all great self-service options. What we've seen is at the end of an inbound call or a customer service call or maybe even an outbound call that was made, after that talk, after that conversation, permission is requested of the calling party to take the survey. And what we have seen is they'll bounce or transfer that patient caller back to the IVR. The IVR will present 5, 7, 8 differing satisfaction-minded questions, like, give us 1 through 5 on how you feel about these A, B, C, D, E, F, and G questions. And when you're at conclusion, Mr. Jones, have a nice day. Thank you, and hang up, right? And what's been really cool is that data gets captured then, and you get a sense of that. You're giving the patient kind of on the way out of this dialogue, on the way out of the door in a way, you're giving them a voice. And now that you have Mr. Jones's thoughts, whether it's maybe he's giving you all 5s and he's really, really happy, or he's giving you all 1s and now you might want to follow up with him, at least you know and you have something you can act on. So IVR technology has really kind of helped, extend not only the 24/7 thing that we mentioned earlier, but also to kind of directly impact an opportunity to improve patient satisfaction. Let me scroll through these here. Mike, let's see. Here's another one, Sean, that I think goes back to your point about outsourcing. And it simply is, what if we, I'm assuming it's a provider, probably a health system, what if we outsource everything to early out? What are your thoughts regarding those analytics that you discussed?
Sure. So, in each client situation is going to be different. So you might have an in-house team that does some collections. You might actually outsource everything to early out. And I think that as you decide to look at those accounts, it's about identifying those patients that are going to pay you just off the statement process. And from that scenario, what we're really talking about is that you want to keep those accounts in-house and parse those out. Even if you just send statements, and you can do some messages later if you need to, you don't have to have people in-house to actively call those. And then you can send the rest out if you want to. Start small, take baby steps. I think that's really the best approach. We're not simply suggesting that you take everything in-house right away. But that's why you need these additional tools that Steve's talking about. Having an IVR, having the ability and the tools to be able to help you manage that process. But you want to take baby steps, and then we'll continue to move forward from there. So.
While we got you, so a couple others that rolled in. This is. I'm not sure of the timing when it was sent in, but in regard to behavioral score, can you give us some details about the variables that are being looked at?
Sure. So for behavioral scores, what you're looking at is you're taking the previous payment history. But what's important there? Okay. So what's important there is to really look at the different types of characteristics. So financial class, patient type. Is there certain sites? So we even go down to a site level. So if you have multiple hospitals or multiple clinics, we're able to look at what are the certain sites that you want to have. So for example, an ER patient versus an outpatient is going to pay differently. A true self-pay versus the balance after insurance is going to have a curve. So those are some of the variables. There's about 50 different variables that we look at total, and taking into consideration, balance size and other things. That's how you want to see how they perform, and that's important because you infuse credit data into that process. So you say, here's a credit profile for a customer. Now here's their healthcare profile upon how they paid you previously. Put the two together and say, what are the trends that we're seeing? And what it really does is it builds that custom approach for you. It's a good question.
Yeah, very, very good question. I think related to that, Sean, and this question has a little bit of context. I'm not sure the timing when it came in, but I'll answer first, and maybe you can answer this more general question, and it's simply, to what extent are you seeing this, and that's what I'm not quite sure of the timing, this get adopted by your clients today? I would say for some of the things I shared regarding the different contact management technologies, automation technologies, that's become pretty much best practice in our client base. We've been really fortunate, though. Our clients are often pretty large health systems, if not very large health systems, with pretty strong business background, pretty strong technology, IT backgrounds, and they're able to take these technologies, adopt them, and kind of make them drive towards a strategic objective. So we're seeing it. What we're also seeing, and I think this has a lot to do with just technology that's hosted today by any of your vendors, those hosted technologies are becoming easier to access. So smaller providers that may not have been as easy to attain some of these different technologies years ago because of the on-premise deployment and the investment in infrastructure and servers and things. Because it's more of a service world today, we're seeing, in Ontario's viewpoint, we're seeing more and more opportunity to take some of those classic best practices and provide it to even some of the smaller health systems out there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's actually quite a trend, I would say. What about for yourself, Sean?
Well, yeah, we're seeing a big demand right now for data and analytics on how to manage that patient population, and it's evidenced by everything that you've talked about, Steve. So, I mean, the high deductible healthcare plans, the driving to consumerism. What's happening is balance are being pushed back to the patient, and especially concerning is the fact that you've got 29 million people over the next 4 or 5 years that are going to be moving from uninsured to true self-pay. So, outside of the fact of what you're going to do with charity on that perspective, but now you've got these co-pays and you've got deductibles and co-insurance now that you have to pay, and that could be upwards to $10,000 or $15,000 in a year. So you've got to figure out how to handle that volume. It's going to be more accounts on your AR. Your days in AR could increase. So providers are seeing this, and they're saying, okay, how do I handle? I've got a big influx now. My bad debt is increasing. How do I handle that volume? And just dumping it directly to an agency, everything, they know they're giving away some of that gravy. What they want to do is figure out how can they do it themselves, and that's a part of taking the tools that you have, that Ontario has, and using that data and analytics to do that. And we're seeing a huge demand for this right now, especially in the last year or two.
Yeah, some of the same things I think we're seeing is that the last 2 years in particular have seen these best practices kind of become very, very common and move out. One I think that I may have brought up or kind of triggered would be in regard to financial assistance programs, and I likely mentioned the acronym 501R. So the question is, we are planning our response to 501R in our financial assistance programs, and what are you seeing in the market? And for those that may not be as in tune to that, under ACA, the Affordable Care Act, passed almost 3+ years ago, had guidance regarding financial assistance programs. There was, at a high level, you had to limit your charges, you had to establish and disclose, that was a bigger part of it, establish and disclose your financial assistance programs. You had to abide by reasonable billing and collection practices. Those were really detailed. And also there was a community health needs assessment on an ongoing basis that you needed to perform. And please, if you're not as tuned into that, there's a lot of great resources out there to learn more about that. But most recently here, while that was bundled into ACA some 3+ years ago, most recently, just in December, there was some guidance offered because that regulation hadn't become finalized yet. And people were kind of caught wondering, well, what do we do? Is this regulation or is it not? So what we've seen is providers are often adopting those regulations in the spirit they were offered, or at a minimum, that's guidance as to where the final regulation will likely land. So we're seeing that occur. And here in December, there were 2 notices that were posted. And the first notice, this is really all about how do we, in this bit of uncertainty, how do we comply? And the first notice was a means by which the charitable hospital, these were policies or practices you could follow if you fail to satisfy the requirements under 501R. And then the second notice, and again, you can find these online. Well, actually, you can find these on our blog, and I'll tell you about that in a second. The second notice provides a temporary safe harbor for charitable hospitals that basically apply for it or communicate or document it. So there's really some clarity that's trying to be brought as we move towards a final regulation. So we're really fortunate at Ontario. We have a great resource on our team, a lady by the name of Roseanne Anderson, who is former president of the American Collectors Association. She's also an attorney. She's a lobbyist. She's very, very tuned into compliance 24/7. So I would suggest if you want to learn some really targeted things about the FAP 501R kind of history, if you go to the Ontario Systems blog, and I believe you can even just simply go to Google and say Ontario Systems blog, and you'll find it. And under there, there's a series of categories on the right-hand side, and ACA and 501R regulation would be places that it could lead you. If for some reason you're not able to find it, you'll see my email address here in a few minutes. You can reach out to me. And I just raised Roseanne up as someone who's not only maybe could bring you current state, but also she is going to continue to watch that for us. So a really great resource, not only Roseanne, but that blog. And in that blog, you can also have the means to contact her directly if it will be helpful to you. So hopefully that was helpful. That's a pretty big topic overall, 501R. I'm scrolling through these here quick, Mike.
Perfect.
Sean, do you have experience in your put your consulting hat on real quick regarding discount plans? Would you want to talk about how discounts should be related to hardship, and maybe even a feel for what those discounts might be in your clients?
Yeah. We do. I mean, we help some clients, and I've got some past experience in my life from working at my healthcare system, and I think that your settlement or your discount policy, the biggest key is that it has to be equally applied to your client base. It has to have some logic behind it. So if you're doing a settlement offer, you have to offer that settlement to all true self-pay patients, as an example, at day X. You can't just pick a subset and offer that, because it's not fair to the patients that do that. And the other thing, if you're doing like a self-pay discount, for example, so if you're doing a sliding scale, so a lot of our clients will do presumptive charity, and then they might do a sliding scale if it's from 250 to 300% of the FPL, or 300 to 350. And again, I think as long as your policies apply that equally to the demographics that you're looking at, then that's fine. You just have to be careful how you apply that, and I think the biggest thing is going to talk to your compliance department and making sure that your intermediary, if your hospital system is okay with that, because obviously as you do your Medicare cost reporting. But it is very typical that discounts are applied, especially on true self-pay accounts. It gets a little dicier if you're doing high deductible healthcare plans, although I've seen some clients that focus on catastrophic plans that have went in and applied some discounts, but typically because of your contract with your carrier, the payer, you don't want to do a type of discount there. But you're seeing more and more of those high deductible healthcare plans, and I think this will be a valid topic once we start to see some of these insurance exchange for the uninsured that they've signed up for as well.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing much the same in our client base, and often it's not only classic things like FPL, but actually going through an interview process. And I think with quality being such a central kind of keyword now to care coordination, we're going to see things like discount programs and just overall connectedness to the patient through not just once they've been discharged, but ongoing, is going to continue to be central to these strategies. Another one that came in that I think I can answer for the group is it's just simply this: what are your recommendations for keeping credit cards on file? Like I think we all know, you really don't want to be writing credit card numbers down or CVV numbers down. What you should be seeking is, whether it's a service you're using or a technology partner like ourselves or Experian, you should be finding partners that are PCI certified. They have gone through the DSS standards. We would recommend not only gone through those, but brought an outside auditor in and have become PCI certified. I know this very clearly because we took considerable time and effort about 12, 14 months ago to take our product through there, Artiva Healthcare in particular, through that PCI certification. It involves a lot of complications, and I would say even various degrees of interpretation depending on how conservative you want to be in managing those. But it will involve things like how long are you going to maintain or store that data? What are your encryption practices around that data? When will you redact it, which is the word for either removing it or maybe removing all but the last 4 digits so you have some transactional history, but you really don't have an actionable credit card there. There's a variety of things that should be considered, and your different solution partners, whether it's your bank or treasury, whether it's an intermediary payment processor, or maybe a core technology like Sean would offer you or we would offer you, that you should seek out that PCI compliance. PCI certification is actually the term you should seek out. This is another regulatory one, and since I kind of posted a little bit about Roseanne, this is something else I think we have seen and responded to, and it's this: contacting mobile phones is a concern within our leadership. And what are your clients doing in response to things like TCPA, which is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and most recently its thoughts regarding mobile phones? And so what we're seeing, again, it comes down to interpretation, and there's a way to lean very, very towards a conservative approach, or everyone finds their balance with their legal team. But in general, what we're seeing is providers are reconsidering their current consent procedures at intake, considering and revisiting topics like implied consent. Do they want to stand on implied consent, which is simply, we obtained Steve's mobile phone one way or another, which implies we can use it, or should we be more intentional about that? And that's something else that they're all seeking out their own guidance and their own decision on. What we see on the technology side, once those things are resolved from the standpoint of compliance and policy, what we see on the technology side are probably two things. Based upon consent, you should be able to approach that patient in a manner that honors your policy. So tracking consent and then acting on consent, I think, is another key attribute to things like TCPA. And then the most conservative, having taken on some technology that we've offered that is in essence no longer a dialing platform. All of the dialing capacity has been removed from it, but you can still connect those calls to your product like Artiva, or you can even record those conversations, all the things you want to do, but you aren't using any quote-unquote capacity to use an auto dialer is kind of the key word. And we've kind of simplified, streamlined that device to be more of a 10-digit manual dialing device, yet still plug and play right into your overall collection strategy. So there's kind of a spectrum that we have seen in response and maybe action taken against things like management of mobile phones. It's very, very, very timely, I think, and probably really well prompted by all the demographic conversations we had a little bit ago. Let me scroll through here. Sorry, a little quick pause.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think I think we caught them all, didn't we, Mike? I know they scrolled in.
No,
like
I think if you're up for it, I'm up for talking us off.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're at that point in time, and I think we covered the questions that I saw scroll in. So yeah, thank you. Please do that.
All right. First off, I want to thank everyone for their extraordinary patience through a sound connection that wasn't great. It turns out it was an issue with GoToWebinar's interface. I apologize. You can tell people you listened to somebody who sounded like they were underwater, and that's a fun topic for dinner tonight. Once again, I want to thank all of you for spending the afternoon with us. We very much appreciate your participation. I also want to thank today's panelists, Steve Scibetta of Ontario Systems and Sean Yates of Experian Healthcare. If you have questions about the content in today's presentation, you can send those to either of the two email addresses that you should see on your screen right now. You should see both Steve and Sean's. Or you can send them to editor@insidearm.com, and I can make sure they get passed on to the right responder. If you have a question, another option, if you have a question that wasn't answered today or you just thought of as you were logging out, there is a survey at the end with space for you to do that. And as a reminder, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation, I believe within a week or so of when we hang up the phone, and that'll be coming to you from Ontario Systems themselves. And with that, we're off. I want to thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Sean.
Likewise. Thank you, folks. Take care.